Hello, this is episode 52 of the Inventive Marketing Club. We're here every Friday morning so we can build a better marketing strategy. Good morning, Claire. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very well. Now, we're going to crack right on because we've got special guest Tim Nash, who is a WordPress and security expert. Tim, hello, Tim. We spoke recently. Was it last week, Tim, we spoke?
We spoke about, just over a week ago.
And Tim has had a look at a website. So we had a 1 hour power hour with Tim to look at our website and basically try and find any ways to eke out any performance, speed improvements, and to look and see if there's any vulnerabilities, because I don't want our site to be hacked. And obviously any learnings from that we can apply to all of our client sites. So maybe just to give us a bit of background, Tim, just tell us a little bit about your history, where you've come from, what you love.
So my name's Tim. I am bill myself as a WordPress security consultant. I have been involved in sort of like the WordPress side of things for over 15 years. When people date themselves in WordPress, they normally do it by feature. I was pre-plugins, and wow. A theme was a thing that you edited by sort of like you had to go in line by line to edit anything, to do absolutely anything. So I was sort of in that bit. I have the dubious honor of being one of the very first commercial WordPress plugin developers. Back then, plugins didn't exist. When they first started coming in, there was this opportunity, and I was like, I want to build a membership site. I actually cannot remember what that membership site was for, but it was for a project. And it was going to be amazing. And I never built the membership site, but I did build the membership software to go in it. And then we sold that and founded a company around selling that. And we were probably, if not the first, one of the very first WordPress development companies that sold plugins.
Right. Yeah.
To give context, back then, we went to one of the very first WordCamps in the UK and were booed. Because not only were we sponsoring, we were booed. Because we were this like commercial developer.
Yes.
And they were
You're earning money from WordPress. Yeah.
Exactly. So that was a very strange figure. If you tell people who came sort of like even 2-3 years later that, they look at you like, what? It's like, yeah. So I founded the company. We were a real company. You know, we had an office. We had telephone numbers. We had big clients attached to us at one point as well. I ended up working with 3 or 4 amazing people. And over time, though, we wound down that company and all went our separate ways. Right. At that time, I was going back into one of my aspects that I really liked of my previous life was doing security. And I was really getting back into doing security, but also very passionate about open source. So I did a period of working as initially I retired, and that didn't last very long. But then I went into a period of doing consulting for larger clients, so big NGOs and government bits on both open source and how you can make open source secure. And then someone came along, and by this point I decided I was completely unemployable. And my good friend Daniel Foster came along and said, "Hey, want to come and help us build a WordPress platform?" So I joined the folks at 34sp.com, who are a managed WordPress host, and built the managed WordPress host on what was meant to be, I think we said, I'll be there for 6 months. I'll just get you started, give you a little bit of a push out the door, get you going, and then I'm going to go back to my life. I was there for five and a bit years, I think, in the end. I left midway through the pandemic. And part of what I was doing there was very much advocacy and going out to people and talking to people about the platform, but actually about my key passions, which were things like security and performance. And I realized as my role was shifting in the company, this is something that I was still very passionate about. And that while I enjoyed loads of the aspects of doing managed WordPress hosting, doing all of it was like, it's a bit overwhelming. And it was I want to focus back and pair myself back to the things I really enjoy, which is helping people stay secure, but educating people. And I enjoy that aspect far more. So I set off on my own, and now I consult for small, medium, even large businesses. I do a mixture of training and individual consultancy on, and if people are if their sites get hacked, I'm the person who hopefully they come to and say, hey,
please help me. Yeah. And that's exactly what we did, because I obviously knew you from the 34 SP days. I think you came to Cheltenham to do a talk at a WordPress group there. Anyway, I have met you in real life, not just a Zoom figure.
I have done every single WordPress user group in the country.
That's nuts, because there are a lot of them.
I had a tick list. I've been to places where there were only one person. I've been to events where the user group only lasted 2 sessions. But I have the honor, dubious as it is, yes, to have spoken, I believe, at every WordPress user group in the country, and I think every WordCamp in a specific location. So I might not have spoken at every WordCamp every year, but every location I believe I've spoken at a WordCamp so far.
No wonder you needed a break from that. That sounds quite intense. But we had, so one of the things, I think when you came out to 34 SP, you just wanted a bit of a break, but then you came back, and then you with the consultancy idea, and you can go and find out more on, is it timnash.co.uk? I'll make sure we mention it again at the end. And on there, you've got quite a nice, very simple idea of having a power hour. So basically during this, you pay your money and you get Tim for an hour to talk about whatever you want. But usually it's going to be, I've got specific problems or specific issues. With us, we've got our rather inventive website. It's based on a theme that we've created. And we roll that theme out to every client that we build a website for. And I know it's made well because I've built it from scratch, but it's always good to get someone who knows more than you to have a peek inside and sort of poke and prod it and tell you where you can sort of fix those vulnerabilities. So that's what I asked him to do. And I know you did a screen share and you took me through a few things. One of them was quite a cool scanner tool. I don't know if you're able to show us that if you've run it again this morning. And have a look, because it might be a bit technical for a lot of the people watching, but it is interesting to see, and it's good to know about these things, about how WordPress runs in the background and what the vulnerabilities are. Even if you're not going to touch them, you're going to get consultants in like Tim or us to help with that. Certainly, if you've got a hacked site, Tim would be the person to speak to.
Very much depends on the hack, but yes.
Yeah, we'll help you not get the hack. But
I prefer it when I speak to people who are not hacked. It's a much nicer experience.
Yeah, in advance of it all going wrong.
But if it does go wrong, then there are people who. I specialize in the sort of really persistent ones. So hopefully if someone ever does get hacked, cleanup isn't. If you follow some simple steps, cleanup can be easy, and while stressful, you can do a good job, and you probably don't need somebody else unless you really are very untechnical or really just worried. And for a lot of people, this is their livelihood, so they'll come to someone just because they need it back up straight away.
Yeah, believe me, a lot of people just they might be able to do a lot of it themselves, but it's at a stressful time like this. It's nice to work with someone else who is quite calm, and I think. On your website, there's a bit of text saying, don't worry, it's all going to be fine. We'll work through it together. And I like that.
And if people do come, it's the persistence ones that they're the ones I have a perverse sense of satisfaction, and they're the ones I enjoy. When someone comes to me and says, I've been hacked now 4 times in a row, we've tried cleaning it, it just keeps coming back. That's one of those, it's a problem. And I can really sink my teeth into it. So, I've just shared my screen, and this is a really just as a sort of what I do and how I do things. This is a really simple tool called WP Scan that absolutely anybody can use for good or ill, and you'll find a lot of security tools that anybody can use them for good or for ill. This tool is called WP Scan. All it does is that it basically sends lots of requests to your site looking for information. Now, it might look for information in the generated page. So when you load up a website, if you go and view the source, there's lots of information in there. If you go and open up your average WordPress website, you can tell from the source code it's a WordPress website. But you can actually also tell things like what plugins are running on it, depending on whether they've added their own scripts. You can tell what versions of those plugins are. If you open up a site, if you look at the end, you're quite often seeing things like JavaScript or the CSS files that are loaded into the page. There's that question mark, and then a version. And that version might relate to the version of WordPress or the version that's being loaded in of the plugin. So it gives away a lot of information. How WordPress is set up is pretty standardized. You can change it, but most people have their plugins, for example, in a folder called wp-content/plugins, plugin name, and then inside that, there will be a file /readme. And in that README, it says, this is the name of the plugin, this is who made it, this is the version. Now, with security, there's really only one rule, and that's everything must be up to date. So an awful lot of bad actors look for plugins and themes that are not up to date, that they know have vulnerabilities because they have been exposed either by security researchers or by other bad actors, and go and exploit them. That's how you get hacked. All this dramatic things that you see of somebody sitting there with a screen going tap, 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 doesn't happen. It's all robots, it's all automated. Someone hit enter, they're making themselves a cup of coffee. They're probably going to make quite a lot of cups of coffee because they're not even hacking you, they're hacking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of sites concurrently, or trying to.
That's right. I mean, often people think it might be personal or they're vulnerable particularly, but it's not them. The bot has just found a site and sort of burrow its way in.
Yeah, it's almost more insulting in many ways, because at least if it was personal, you could feel sort of something towards them, but it's not. It is 99.99999% of hacks are automated bots. If someone is personally trying to hack your site and they have even the basic ounce of knowledge or the ability to pay someone, your site will probably be hacked. And that's when dealing with your normal security threats, not actually a threat that we would cover in these sort of sessions, because that's a whole different board game, someone actually caring. But the vast majority don't care, so it's fine. We can stop automated attacks very easily.
Yeah.
AP Scan is a tool that helps you spot vulnerabilities. Now, it's from an outsider's perspective. So it's not logging into your website. It doesn't have any escalated privileges. It doesn't know anything else than what you could find out if you yourself went and hit the various URLs and looked at that information. If we scroll down, it is a command line tool. You can get a GUI for it. I think WP Scan themselves also allow you to use their website to send to go through and do these tests. I use it in a Docker container, and you literally run one line of code, you basically give the URL, and it will give me just a really, really quick overview. It's not in depth. There's much more I could find out. This gives me a quick overview. This is what I use for pretty much every client whenever they first come to me, because I can go, and I'll know within seconds whether this is going to be a good call or a bad call. And you'll be pleased to know yours was a relatively good call. So it may look like there's lots of stuff there, but basically it starts by giving you what in general public information it can tell about you. And we can learn things quite quickly. So for example, in your site, we can see that you've got that XFAST CGI cache message right at the top in these interesting entries. So we know somewhere around the world here, you are using an Nginx server. We also know that we're hitting some sort of cache. So we know that what's being returned here is static. This now narrows us down, because we also can see right underneath that, you have the CF cache status and a reference to Cloudflare. So we know that you're not only using Cloudflare at the front, we know that somewhere at the back is Nginx, which is also caching.
Yes. Right, so you can actually tell a lot about not only the server it's run, well, not only the server that you can see, the CDN servers caching it, but also what's behind that. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. So we can go through and go, oh, wow, that's really useful and interesting. We also then can just check for things like, is XML RPC enabled? Oh, can I do nasty things with that? Is the REST API enabled? Are there any must-use plugins? Must-use plugins are particularly interesting because they're always activated.
Yeah, these are something I only learned about recently. Because I was trying to find something on a site and eventually tracked it down to that particular folder, because they're very similar to plugins, but they're sort of added in this MU folder. And what maybe you can tell what is the difference between a plugin that you have in the plugins folder and then one that goes in the must use?
So there's two differences. Three differences. One, the MU plugins are always activated. You can't go in and, as an admin, the only way to remove them is to actually go into the MU folder itself.
Delete it.
Likewise, they're activated the second they're in that folder.
Yeah.
Whereas in the other where plugins, you go in and activate them through. This means that they're actually called if you have this hierarchy of when things are called, they are called before the plugins. So they sit in the level of when their actions are taken, they will be taken before the plugins. There also can only be one file in there. So you can't put folders in there, you just put that file. Now that file can link to other files elsewhere via PHP stuff that we don't need to worry about. But on the whole, that means the idea is that they're meant to be small and they are meant to be things that you must use.
Yeah, hence the name.
Yeah. They're a hang up from WordPress when WordPress actually was multi-site was separate from WordPress.
Yeah.
The MU plugins were to do with the things that you would have across the entire site.
Yes, of course, yeah.
So the MU, actually, the must use thing got renamed because it was originally a WPM, when multi-site was originally WPMU, and that was the multi-user plugin folder. But, well, time's moved on, and now it's the must use plugin folder. So if we keep going down, we can see things like the WordPress version, which is really helpful. You know, if someone's got an out-of-date version of WordPress running, that is gold dust to a bad actor.
Yeah.
If we go down, we can see what themes being used. So in this case, it's Inventive version 3. It's exciting. I wonder if he's left version 2 on there. And version 1. So we could, if you were a bad actor, now you'd be going, oh, well, this is interesting. This is custom theme. You can tell this. Primarily by the v3 on there, but also you like, hang on a minute, this site's called rather Inventive, this is Inventive, yeah, okay, this is a custom theme. There's unlikely to therefore be any public vulnerabilities for the theme itself. So I can't just go over to WP Scan's vulnerability database and find this theme on there. It's not going to be there.
That's right.
That doesn't mean that it doesn't have vulnerabilities that aren't known, because you may well have used specific bits of code. A good example is you might have used Tim Thumb on there, which was a PHP thing for doing resizing images, and is notoriously insecure.
Yeah, I haven't, but yes.
But you never know. The other thing is,
absolutely.
But we also know that you have v3 on there. So the next step, if I was manually looking at this, is to go, I wonder if v2's on there.
Yeah.
I wonder if v1's on there. I wonder if he used Tim Thumb on those.
Yeah.
So I can get access to other things through that information. Then we come down through the plugins. Now, these plugins have all been identified by finding either their README file, or if it's been found because there's some sort of query in the HTML itself. So stuff like
okay. So it finds a little pointer, it finds a CSS file, it finds something, goes, oh, I know that, and then I can go and dig for it. Yeah. Now,
on the scan that I did a very passive version, which is try not to upset anybody. Try not to be noticed too much, and also don't be uber aggressive. I only want you to come back in like in a couple of minutes. I don't want you to spend all day on it. So it's only looking for like the top X number of plugins. You can set this and say, I'd like you to find every plugin that you know about ever. And then you don't go and make a coffee, you go and make your dinner, go to sleep, and tomorrow you wake up and have a look at this, and you'll see it should detect pretty much every plugin that as long as it doesn't get blocked along the way, every plugin that's in the WordPress repo, plus most of the things you'll ever find in places like Theme Forest and major commercial plugins. And we should come back and we should get a list, not only of the plugins themselves, but we'll probably get a list including their version numbers. And if you're using WP Scan and you've got it set up with an API key, it will also return if there's any known vulnerabilities for that given version. One of the nice things is we can go down and we can see here that we have a plugin there that is not up to date. So we now immediately can go, okay, that plugin is not up to date. What do we know about this plugin? Now, I can, looking at that, immediately tell you that that's a premium plugin. Not least because it conveniently says the word premium in the name, which is very handy. But we can tell because of the style of plugin, We can also make good guesses as to why it might not be updated because everything else was, implying that your site's on some sort of automatic updates. I have a little bit of cheating. I know exactly who hosts your site, so I know that you're on automatic updates. But the way this site appears, it's obvious that this plugin is not being automatically updated, and then you have to ask the question, why? Oh, it's a premium plugin. Okay. Does that mean the license is expired? Because this is a really common scenario where you've got a plugin and you bought it and you sort of went, yeah, okay, I've put it on my site. It's all working great. The annual renewal came round. You didn't maybe click on the link, you forgot about it. And now it's no longer receiving those updates. That is the ideal scenario for a bad actor who goes, if you're going to target something, you're going to find premium plugins that have a known vulnerability. And then you're basically just going to hit all these targets, knowing that there's a much higher percentage chance that they're going to be, that they're not going to have been updated because nobody's renewed their license. Then say on a WordPress.org plugin, where automatic updates are now becoming so much more common that people just forget about it. So go and update that plugin.
Yeah, and that's what I found very interesting when we talked about that last week, because you pulled that up. I can't remember the reason it's not updated. It's not because I'm cheap. Probably something missed, as you say. But what I thought was interesting is you're quite right. If it's a free plugin and it comes from the WordPress repository, it's just going to get updated. So it's always going to be up to date. But with a premium plugin, it's not. It's going to hit that license is going to end. You're not going to get the free updates anymore, the included updates, and it will just stop updating, even though there are more available. And so you're quite right. It's almost like premium plugins are more at risk of becoming a vulnerability if you don't pay for them, because they're so easy to then spot and see they're out of date.
I mean, they're for life, not just for Christmas.
Absolutely. But yes, it's on my list, that one.
Update that plugin. But we were, I mean, last week when we spotted that, we also went through and just quickly checked to see whether it was vulnerable. You can do this yourselves. You can have there's a version of WP-Scan that is a WordPress plugin that basically you give it an API key and it will always tell you if there is vulnerabilities related to the version of the WordPress or the version of a plugin that is out of date on your site, which is quite handy. So if you are in a scenario where you're not doing regular automatic updates, then we'll get to why you're doing it wrong. But if you're not in that scenario, then something like WP-Scan, actually their vulnerability detector on your own site, not using this external tool, is a really handy way. So at least you get a big red warning saying, by the way, that plugin you've not yet ordained to update now has a major vulnerability and bad things are about to happen to you.
Yeah.
And bad things will happen to you. I think that that's worth really emphasizing. It's not a matter of, oh, I will be fine. It's a matter of time and how long it will take for something to find you.
Yeah, so I thought this is just as you say, a passive way to have a look at a site and see where areas to dive into are great. And it was nice that we only got one thing to look at there. The other area you looked into was speed, performance of the site, because that's something else I wanted to look at. And we did actually talk quite a lot on that. But I don't know if you've got it, but one of the things we looked at was a waterfall approach to looking at the speed. So it's basically where the tool will load the website and then give you some metrics, like you can see on the screen right now. Plus, it also shows you the order in which things load. So anyway, I won't talk through that. Maybe you want to take us through why this is useful.
So this is swapping hats effectively into a performance hat. If your site's not loading quickly, then you're losing sales, you're losing people, visitors. It's as simple as that. And getting fast sites is really critical for most businesses. Anything over 3 seconds and you've pretty much lost that person. It's probably ever so slightly more on a mobile, but it's not actually that much more anymore.
Yeah.
If your website's taking 3 seconds to load, they are looking at the top of their mobile to see whether they're on 4G or not. because their
true.
automatic assumption is that the website should be loading that fast. Therefore, it must be their network that's having a problem, which is your only saving grace, because hopefully by the time that they've looked up, realized it's not, your page is loaded. So you probably get an extra second or two, but it's only that. So this is a tool that I really like. It gives me a nice quick overview of a lot of the issues to do with the front page and how the site is loading. This tool on its own will not fix anything. It won't even help you totally identify all the problems. It will just help you find an overview of what's going on. And occasionally you can drill down and go, oh, actually, that thing shouldn't be doing that, or that's loading in a weird way, or this. So this is a tool called webpagetest.org. There are plenty of others out there. I find Web Page Test gives me the right level of detail and gives me the option to choose from lots of locations and lots of things. But even a tool like Pingdom, there are a couple of GTmetrix is another one.
Yeah.
I'm less of a fan of GTmetrix for complicated reasons. With Web Page Test, you can actually set it up yourself. So you can have it on a box in the corner if you wanted to.
Sort of running regularly and giving you speed updates. Yeah.
Because so its back end is open sourced, which I think is fantastic. And if given a preference for which tool I'd go for, this is the one that I tend to go for. If we scroll down on here, I've put in which one have I on? This is your main homepage. Mm-hmm. So we can see it in there on the mobile version, just sitting there. And we get these wonderful sort of big metrics with colors on them. I don't think I need to tell you that red is bad and blue is better, but red and orange traditionally are more negative, and then everything else is going to be better. And directly, each one of these means a thing, but really the bits we might be interested in are first byte. Mm-hmm. This is how long it takes from us going hello to the server responding back with hello. No data has actually passed particularly between us. We've just said hello.
Yeah.
It is the equivalent of holding up your hand and waving. When the start render is when things start to appear on the page.
Yeah, so we can see that in a little timeline, can't we, down the bottom?
Yeah. So the start render is really when we start to see stuff. And then as we're coming along, we can see that actually it takes quite a while for it to start swapping around and jumping around. So this is when, about here is when we've really hit the end of our loading. But realistically, way back here, it was still usable. We could still start to use things at this stage. The scary bit is if we imagine this as a loading process, we start with this white screen. This is the length of time along our waterfall before we start to see anything. And then it slowly...
So we're just starting to look at the top of the screen.
Yeah. And then one of the more interesting things is when we start loading pages and JavaScript starts getting involved, we can tell when we look at something like this when we look at this sort of film strip thing, we can see the second that your JavaScript starts loading up. Because you'll notice all of a sudden, it's all changed.
Yeah.
And if you've loaded web pages, you might be familiar with this sudden moment of flash, and things have changed around and moved. So we can see that being shown clearly there. And then, your logo finally turns up only 6 seconds late. Now, I am being very mean because this is being simulated on a 3G connection. So it's not as bad as it's coming across. You are looking at your website in, I think, some sort of farm in the middle of America.
Yeah, that's right. I noticed that you'd put it up somewhere far away as well.
Yeah, because it would make a rubbish demo if it looked good.
Yeah. Well, and also sometimes I used to have this when I worked for an exhibition company. We used to make digital stand graphics and CD-ROMs. And one of the things we used to do is our machines that we developed them on were rubbish. But one of the rationales is if we develop them on these machines and they are fast, when normal people run them and they put the disc in on the exhibition stand, or people are using it at home, that CD-ROM is going to be blazing fast. It's kind of like this, if you can test it slow and make it faster, then you'll get those speed improvements for most people as well.
That is the best excuse I've ever heard for, no, I'm not buying you a new computer.
Yeah.
You should suffer. You should suffer for your art. Is not down. Thankfully, we can simulate slowness. As I suspect you probably could back then as well. But so by the time we get to 6 seconds, we see that the image is loaded. Now, what's really handy about this is that we can then click on this waterfall. Now, I both hate and like waterfalls. They look very pretty.
It's pretty, yeah.
And it's visual for lots of people who are, when they see stuff that I talk about, we were showing to the security side a CLI screen with lots of text on it, and when I do lots of performance tweaking, I'm actually not normally looking at the front end but the back end, so I'm looking at things like log files. So to come along and actually see something that's pretty is quite nice for me. But for a lot of people, when I'm talking to them, if I show them a bunch of log files, they're going to put their heads in the sand and they'll stop listening to them.
Yeah.
So showing them a visual thing and going, look, this is your website, this is how it loads, is really helpful for them. And we can see right at the top, this is how long it takes before the actual page starts to come back. And there's loads of reasons why, because if you imagine going through to connecting to a website, you start off by going, I want to go to that page. You type it into your browser, you hit go. The browser goes, oh, okay, right, that's a website. Cool, I know about those things. I'm going to go and ask the DNS server what the IP address is for that website. So it goes and asks the DNS server, and the DNS server says, here's a bunch of numbers. It goes, oh, fancy numbers. Okay, I'll plug those numbers in and I will go and talk to that website. It goes, hi, I'm a browser. Would you give me the details back from this page? Then you have a whole bunch of literal handshakes. In some cases, when you see the packets going backwards and forwards, the text in them do say things like, hi, because they're saying hello on their way through. They do a handshake because we're trying to encrypt these days. You're almost never going over an unencrypted line anymore. So they've done a handshake, and depending on whether you're using HTTP1 or HTTP2, and the vast majority of connections use HTTP2 now, you end up in a scenario where you're basically constantly shaking hands. And you keep shaking hands and you keep that connection open, and we start sending things down the wire. And the first thing we're going to send down is going to be the page containing all the stuff. So that's the HTML comes down. Once the HTML is down, the browser goes, okay, I'm going to go through this. Oh, I need some CSS. I need these files, and then I need these files. Oh, and so then it starts loading in the CSS. So it says, I need these files. Now, thankfully, browsers are smart and they actually check what they need first and go, oh, actually, I need about 10 of these files. Please give me all 10 of these. Historically, browsers weren't quite as clever as that. And they would go, oh, I need that file. Okay, I'm the server. I'll come and here's that file. No, I need this one as well. And backwards. So at least we're now batching. And you can see this is why we get these big drops of lots.
Yeah, exactly. You can see them all loading at the same time.
And the only difference is the file size is basically determining how much how long the request is taking. But then within the CSS files, we're going to have other things. For example, the CSS files might load fonts. So once at some point down the line, at the moment, all we've done is requested those CSS. We're not using them in any way. We've just said we want those files. We're also then going to say, oh, actually, we also have found a bunch of JavaScript. Can we have the JavaScript files? Oh, yes. Now, so we'll load up those JavaScript files. Now we're going to come back along and say, oh, we want some images. Can you give me the images? Because we're just finding them as we're going along. Then at some point, we're going to go, oh, YouTube. Right. We would like this file from YouTube, and YouTube will say, yes, and here's all the other files.
Yeah, and you can have everything else and all the tracking.
Yep, and we can have everything else and all the tracking.
Yeah.
But within our CSS files, as we start to load out the CSS, it's going to go, oh, I use this particular font. And the browser's going to go, really? Can I have those too then, please? Yeah. And you'll find if you really fast sites, if you look at the typography, you're going to notice over time that the really fast sites mysteriously all have very basic font sets. And it's not unusual for you to see big corporate websites that load really fast, somebody like Apple, who are actually using default system fonts specifically to avoid you having to download yet another system font. Now, browsers are clever. And this simulation isn't totally true, because browsers are smart enough to go, oh, look, you're on the 28th site today that uses Google Analytics. Do you know what? I've got that file already. I'll just use this one. And so it uses its own internal little cache at the beginning. So it's not a complete the same. But if you were to go into Firefox or Chrome and go into your web tools branch and then click on network and load a page, you would see this happening in your browser as well. So you can see the same thing in your browser. And you can see all the connections going through. And in that case, it will also show you which ones it's been cached. So you'll be able to go, it got that one from the cache, it got that one from somewhere else, it got that one from somewhere else. But with these tools, we can now start to see, okay, what do we need to be loading up and prioritizing? And our two goals really are make this bit load quicker at the beginning so that we get something on the page. And then our second page is that to make sure that when we load up, we don't end up with too much things moving afterwards. Actually, having a slow loading page is not a problem, as long as whoever's coming to your site can engage with it.
Yes. So it's like almost streaming the page to them, so they get the content they need and they can start navigating, even if you've got other things loading in the background. Is that what you mean?
Yes. I mean, metrics are completely a lie.
Yeah.
What none of this will show you, none of these metrics are useful enough to tell you when can the person interact, because that will depend on so many things. But that's the key for us. But performance is if we think of performance not as something about speed loading, but we think of it as simple usability. And therefore, performance is part of UX, not necessarily part of anything else. It gives you a really good sort of mental place to be at. So therefore, we want things to be quick because we need to make sure that they're in place so that people can interact as soon as possible. Rather than worrying about the fact that something says it takes 7 seconds to fully load the page. That's irrelevant. As long as they could interact in the first couple of seconds, all is good. In your case, when we were going through, we were looking at a couple of things. The big one was that you had a video that's quite high up.
Yeah, it was an image, actually. Yes, it was an image that popped into place. And so it loaded all the text. And then suddenly this image popped in and moved. It shifted everything, which is something I've looked at, actually, because we use the plugin Smush and it's got lazy loading. And that's what was causing it. The lazy loading was basically saying, well, I'll load that one. I'll get all the text loaded. And then I'll start looking at the images and only bringing on the images that they can see. And it was just the way it was doing that after the text is loaded. I've put in place, and I need to come back and test it now the cache is cleared. You could put in something, say, don't lazy load these images. So we'll see. It'd be interesting to see if that has changed it.
And one of the things you can also do, obviously, Smush itself is lazy loading. So Smush is using its own JavaScript library to decide what needs to be lazy loaded and when. All major browsers these days support what's referred to as native lazy loading. So you basically say this image should probably be lazy loaded, or all of my images on my site should be lazy loaded, and the browser will go, right, I'll decide when I'm going to show this. The advantage to that is that it doesn't matter if it's your screen on your desktop or your phone. They are going to be they will load different images based on the view size that's available at a given point. And the big thing that the browser has over the developer is that the browser actually knows it's showing. The developer only knows what the browser told it. And those are two very different things. So if you're going to use lazy loading, I would try to use the built-in browser's lazy loading. Lots of the older lazy loading libraries still work. They can be very effective in certain scenarios, but let your browser do it. It's one of those features that now it's here, make use of it.
Yeah, you know what? I remember you saying that, and I did check to see if Safari fully supported it. It does. You're right. They all do. It was. I think it just didn't support some other formats like video or something like that. I may have ticked that as well, so I've got to check that. That's something I'm going to check today. But that's a good point, actually. Yes, because it's better. The browser knows how to do it all, and you might be loading a little bit less JavaScript code, so it speeds it up that way.
Yeah, and so something like this waterfall wouldn't show that.
No,
very well, because it's not trying to implement it that way.
Yeah.
And it'll have all the feature flags even if it says, oh, I'm using Chrome, it's using Chrome headlessly and all the feature flags switched off because it's
that's right. Yeah. And of course it's not thinking about lazy loading, it's just loading as it comes. Yeah. Yeah.
But you should be able to see this for yourself when you're going on your site. It should feel snappier and more responsive. But you can also look in your network tools, which will always tell you the truth and what you're doing. But a couple of things to think about with performance generally is that if you've got stuff in the head, that's CSS or JavaScript, that is effectively going to block the browser until the browser has processed through it. So for most JavaScript, for example, you want to put that in the footer. And you might consider just putting a small amount of CSS in the head. It's often referred to as critical CSS. This is the CSS the minimal amount of CSS you need to load. And then you can load the rest of the CSS in via JavaScript in the footer, or even just CSS directly in line. And this will provide you with some performance improvements. It does make your code more clunky.
Yeah.
And you do then need to do lots of extra steps to bounce through, but it works quite well.
There is a bit more faffing. So what you might be, is it a bit like thinking about lazy loading? So you think, well, I'm going to put in the head enough CSS code to load everything I need that the people will see in the first page. And I guess it's going to have to be for a desktop, so you've got the maximum in there. Everything else below that, if you've got any funky stuff going on, we can load that later, but we'll load just what they see in that first page load initially, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's we're like, what is our minimum viable product effectively? What can we just to get them the experience started? Because that gets us our start render much quicker. And then we can just say, yeah, we'll load the rest in. As long as we don't move things around, people don't mind really if that funky animation doesn't load for a couple of seconds. But while you're thinking along these lines, you can start then going, well, hang on, do I need funky animation?
Yeah.
Oh, can I change this for some reason? Do I need X or Y or Z? And the biggest causes of slowness outside of like actual server issues is with people loading stuff they don't need. And the biggest sort of, I was going to say criminals for doing this, are things like YouTube embeds. So one of the things you could consider doing, let's say if you've got a YouTube embed, is rather than embedding directly, consider lazy loading that whole YouTube video. So having a static image, you can have the thumbnail with the button. When you click that, sure, it will take an extra first, a couple of seconds to load in that JavaScript, but you're not loading it at the start. It's really worth digging down into your analytics and seeing what things are being used. You will be amazed how slow putting your Instagram pictures in your sidebar, or putting Pinterest stuff on there, anything that loads from an external site in particular, you are at their mercy, both as what they're going to put into it, but also how slow they're going to be. So stuff like that can be taken out. You'll see
that's true actually, because there's a plugin we use on a couple of sites where it loads the Instagram feed on the server side. So it's not on the front end with JavaScript, it's loading on the server side, which helps a little bit because then it can be cached. It's not having to wait for it to load. And interesting, you say about YouTube, it's something I've been thinking about. And we've gone partway there for our club videos. So all of the club videos are available on our website, and they're all blog posts, except if you're not logged in as a member, the video is replaced with a thumbnail from the video, which we get from YouTube. I was thinking about making a plugin, and you may recommend some plugins that do this, to actually just do that for me. So it runs through the page and says, any YouTube videos, let's display the thumbnail image first, and then a bit of JavaScript. So when they click on it, it will just, as you say, just do a swap in the code. Because it does seem that obviously that's going to be a lot faster than repeatedly loading all of these frames in and being at the mercy of YouTube.
I'm not 100% sure, but I actually think that the YouTube block in the new Gutenberg lazy loads by default.
We'll do that. Okay, I'm going to look into that.
Now, if it doesn't, don't all come and have a go at me, because I'm pretty sure that that's one of its default.
Well, it'll be very new. You'd be forgiven.
But there are plugins out there. I'm trying. Ross Wintle did one, I'm pretty sure, where he, as a block, as a test, ages ago when Gutenberg was a thing that was starting to happen. But there are others out there, and I'm sure we can pop a couple in the links.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find them. Something I have done, which we put into our theme, which helps a little bit, is to change the loading embed for YouTube to YouTube no cookie. And that does speed things up a little bit, because YouTube is then obliged to send you less rubbish.
Yes.
Only a little bit. And it does tend to not serve so many files until you click play.
Yeah, I mean, using YouTube no cookies across the board is a good idea anyway, and leads you on to the less cookies, the less stuff you're putting on other people's computers, performance-wise, privacy-wise, it's all they all start and security-wise, they all start merging in. A bad attack vector is other people's stuff.
Yes.
A really good example is that have you heard of MageCart, which is
yes, I have, yeah,
a hacking vulnerability that was started with Magento, but it's onto WooCommerce. They basically steal people's credit card data.
Yeah.
Now they do this in a variety of ways. One was that they hacked into an accessibility website and put the JavaScript code in the embed for the text-to-speech widgets. So any website that had the text-to-speech widget for this particular company, which lots of big corporate sites did because they wanted to be good for accessibility, were actually also getting a card skimmer attached. And you could ask, why was there this text-to-speech widget on the checkout page? But it would be weird for it not to be. So they managed to get it in onto the checkout pages, and as you put your card details in, the widget went, thank you.
Yeah, it's just looking at everything on that page and stealing it. Yeah.
And worse, if you were a dev who was just looking over the code, that's what the job of that widget was to do, was to look on that page and steal it. Only there was just an extra few lines that said, oh, and by the way, if there's this sort of matching type string, i.e. card number appears, surf it off to bad person over there. Now that vulnerability was not a vulnerability on the sites that were being hacked. That was a different site had been hacked. They were using those widgets to do that. The ultimate hack will be when somebody hacks Google Analytics.
Yeah, because that code is loaded on a lot of sites.
Everywhere, but close to everywhere.
Yeah.
It's also really slow. Take Google Analytics off and your site will improve significantly.
Yeah, it's odd. It's something for another talk another day, but I'm looking into how we cannot use it from a just reducing the speed, privacy point of view. Do we need all of those stats? There's lots of issues if you do remove it that, Google Analytics is quite useful. The data can be put into different places. That's why I like it, but, I'd love to get rid of it.
I would say that the question to ask anybody is when did they last use it? And this comes for everything. This comes for security.
I use it, but yeah, you're quite right.
Yeah, it's security or performance. When did you last use it? Oh, cool. Yeah. You used it yesterday. That's good. That means it's something that you're using. It's something you do with. Okay, what did you use it for? Well, I went in and saw how many live visitors we had. Cool. What did you do with that data? I didn't. I just really wanted that dopamine hit. Like, oh, okay, that seems fair. We put a blog post up, and I sat there looking at my analytics, refreshing, going, oh, there's like 4 people on my site now, and that's a big, it literally is a dopamine hit. Now, if you're using analytics for that, there are better alternatives. If they go, well, actually, we drew down this spreadsheet and it was connected to all of our goal tracking, and we were looking at the conversion rate and we compared it against these and all the really sort of cool features that are in Google Analytics, then you say, oh, actually, no, you use Google Analytics. You're not just using a stats counter. Put all this extra stuff in it. And that then gives you a valid use case for Google Analytics. But if it's in security, if it's in performance, if it's in privacy, if it's in accessibility, all of these sort of the broad areas, if you're not using it and you can't justify it, don't have it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's something I quite enjoy looking at when we're either taking over someone's website or just having a look at it for them, because they want to make some design changes. I always like looking at the plugins on there and seeing, well, are all of these used? I mean, in a lot of cases, when people are designing sites, They chuck on a load of plugins. The theme says to add all these plugins in on as well. They have them all active, and a lot of them aren't needed because they were using it during development and they're trying out different plugins. And really what we need to do is put it onto a staging server and start switching things off and seeing what's not being used and then deleting them. And it's quite a cathartic process going through that, and actually then have a faster and probably more secure site off the back of it.
I am incredibly ruthless. I will go as far as
there you are. Yeah.
I will go as far as removing the users. Seriously, if I take over a site and I see that there's 20 people on there and 18 of them are administrators, the first thing I do is whack down 17 of them to authors and see how long it takes for someone to complain.
Yeah. Yes,
that
that's
gives me a
true.
hint as to how, if someone complains immediately, okay, then we can have a conversation about what do you do?
Yeah.
But you'll be amazed how long it takes before someone, particularly when it's the boss, the company CEO or somebody who has that privilege because of who they are, not because of what they needed it for.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
To the point that I create special roles for them just to make them feel better about themselves.
Super special admin, yeah.
Pretty much. In quotes with the special.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to them. They need that because they might need that in the future.
Yeah.
And they should have access to everything. But actually, from a security perspective, managing to socially engineer the boss is going to be a lot easier than many of his employees.
Yeah.
They're much more likely to fall for things than their employees because of the nature of what they're doing and how if you can get your eyeballs into a boss, as long as you can get engagement with them, they're often busy trying to do other things and they're not going to be familiar with how things are done. And when you send them that reset link, they'll just go, oh yeah, I'll click that. Whereas the person who uses WordPress every day, day in, day out, goes, that doesn't look anything like it. Why are you sending it to scammysite.com? Right?
Yeah, who is this person?
Our website's not called that. It's called Viagra.com, sort of thing. So, yeah, drop everybody's permissions, remove all the plugins that I don't think are being activated. Anything that's deactivated, deleting those plugins. Yeah. And then see who complains.
Yeah.
And, I have a fairly peaceful life and not that many people complain to me. I'm hoping that's because I haven't done too much damage and it's not that they just all hate me. But
well, I think you do need to do that. There's so many sites there where they just leave things running just because that's how it was. They don't want to touch it. But actually, I think things should be poked and prodded. And we were talking about updates earlier, and one of the things we spoke about on our call last week is that automatic updates are much better to have in place. And in fact, trying to update as soon as possible when that update comes out, not waiting, trying to update the same day, if not just the day after if you need to, because the chance of something breaking is a lot smaller than maybe the chance of you getting hacked if you leave that vulnerability open for a little bit. And so it's much better to make sure things are updated and you're poking and prodding and keeping things as clean as possible. The chance that, there may be a conflict, there may be some issue down the line, but, in the probably 2 or 3 years we've had auto updates running, we've never had any issues. And actually the only issues we've had are some of the very minor plugins that I've made that do special features on the website. And it's usually because there's a new feature and it's a minor fault, not something that's visible, but something you see in the logs.
You are not alone. Most people who do switch on automatic updates, people understandably are very nervous of things that they don't control. But the way you sort of explain to them that this is, when you do an automatic update, what do you actually do? Or when you do an update, so a manual update, what do you actually do? Oh, well, I go on the website and I click the update button. Right, cool. Then what do you do? Then I click the next one underneath. Right? And then what do you do? I click the one underneath. Then what do you do? I click the next one. And then what do you do? Then I go and make a cup of tea. Why would you you could have made the cup of tea. You could have been drinking your tea at the same time that was pressing the update button. If you're not actually testing these things afterwards, then there was no point you doing it. If you're blindly updating regardless, blindly automatically update. And the good news is it rarely breaks because you're keeping everything in sync. When people do have issues, it's nearly always because they've gone, well, we automatically update, and it broke. Well, oh, really? Why? What broke? WooCommerce. Oh, did you automatically update WooCommerce? No. We wouldn't dare do that. It'll break. So everything else automatically updated and got new things, and then broke because the version of WooCommerce stayed really old. If you just kept WooCommerce up to date with everything else, it would have all been fine. So normally that's where you see, if someone's complaining about automatic updates, that's the reason why. It's because they are keep holding certain things back. Problems always happen, and there are good ways to test. We discussed visual ping.
Visual ping, that looked quite good. Yeah,
it's a visual regression testing tool, which, to be honest, you can just go in to tell you if you're in a scenario where you have a boss, you can go and literally go to a boss and say, hi, I'm going to implement a visual regression testing tool, and
sounds
walk
good.
out the room, and they'll just be there going, that sounds cool, followed by an expensive. But you'll have already left the room by that point, so it's absolutely fine. But yeah, something like visual ping, which is relatively very cheap, and all it does, it sounds really complicated, but it takes a screenshot and says, this is my master screenshot. This area in this screenshot is the area I care about. Then every day it will take another screenshot and go, ooh, do they match? If the area that you care about matches, it's fine. If not, it sends you a message. So on a WordPress website, you could just say, okay, I want you to match the header and the footer. That seems a reasonable, sort of a good compromise. Yeah. Obviously, if you've got a traditional blog with lots of articles on the homepage and things move, every time you update the article, you do not want to get a visual ping notification. So having the footer means that the page loaded fully. Having the top means you can go through. You could also do this for like the checkout page or the cart pages. And you can have this running every day. Now, you can tell it what time you want to do this. And in most systems, you can tell the automatic updates what time you want to update. So you can have it set up so that your staging site gets updated at 2 a.m. in the morning, visual ping does a visual ping on it at 2 a.m. in the morning, and your main website gets updated at 9 a.m. I'd like it if you were just doing that on your main website. I don't think you necessarily need to use the staging site, but if you didn't feel comfortable doing that, the staging site is there. And if there's a problem, you'll be notified by it.
Yeah, you get a window of opportunity.
Yeah. That for me is the good compromising, because now I'm not doing anything and it doesn't need me. The biggest worry when I hear people saying I manually update is, okay, you manually update every day. Yeah, of course I do. When you go on holiday, you manually update.
Yeah.
Do you not have a life? Heaven forbid if you're hit by a bus, because you're going to be in hospital going, well, I don't have my legs in the air, but I've still got that one finger I could use to press the automatic update, just to go update. It shouldn't rely on a person or a process. If you can narrow down your processes and get a good written process, then you can automate that process.
Well, it's like what you highlighted earlier when you're using WP Scan. There was a plugin there that was premium plugin, and I need to do something. So I need to resubscribe the license to get that working. That requires me to do it. Well, there are always other things that I need to do, and it's always a low priority until it becomes a high priority. So absolutely, if you can get everything to update itself and then deal with the problems when they come up, and they don't, or as you say, set something up so you've got a window of time for you to fix things if it's really that crucial. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Tim, we've come to the end. Thank you very much for going through this. I mean, it's great to go through it again because there's a few things that certainly on the lazy loading that I picked up again. So thank you very much. Is there, what would you like to share with people? Anything, anywhere you want people to go?
I mean, you can find me on all the usual hidey beholes that are the internet. I'm T Nash on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn and bits, and it's Tim Nash. And timnash.co.uk is my website. Reach out if you want to talk to me. I'm quite approachable, I believe. I won't scare you too much.
Despite what it says on your website about you, you are a very nice person and more than approachable. And I recommend if you are concerned about your security, or in fact not concerned, you just want to know that everything is good, definitely worth getting a power hour from Tim on his website. I highly recommend that. Thank you very much, Tim. We'll keep in touch. I'm going to go through your notes again and make sure we get everything ticked off. But for now, I think that's everything. Claire, do you have any final questions before we finish?
No, that was brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed that, actually. Sort of some of it was a bit overwhelming with all the sort of lines of code. So I really like the visuals. But yeah, no, thank you, Tim. That was brilliant.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We're here every Friday from 10 a.m. with a variety of different topics. Claire, we've got another Claire coming on next week. Is that right?
Yes, Claire Womesley-Moss. So we'll be looking at greener marketing. I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, that should be good, actually. I like Claire. She's got some good things to say. We cover everything in marketing, from strategy, social, SEO, video, and technical stuff when Tim comes on. If you can't watch live, do share the Zoom link with a friend. And, as you know, we record everything. So feel free to catch up on Basecamp and our new website link when we move everyone over. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.